meeting, of course, meeting the demands of ASUU, but the implementation of no work, no pay policy by the federal government perhaps compounded that situation.
At an emergency meeting in Abuja to review developments, the ASUU leadership again announced the continuation of the strike. The statement that was released by the president of ASUU did say that there had been indeed no substantial progress made on the demands of ASUU. That is their own side of the story, Claire.
Well, this development, of course, has dashed to the hope of many students who are optimistic that the union might suspend the strike at this time in the interest, of course, not just of the students themselves, but also the nation at large.
So, what are the issues still at stake? And why is it that ASUU hasn't yielded, as it were, to calls by eminent Nigerians to return to the classrooms while negotiations continue? Now, is industrial action really in the interest of the educational development or other undisclosed interests? Why is it difficult for the union's leadership, some would ask, to shift grounds in their demands? These are some of the issues we intend to focus on as we discuss the indefinite extension of the current ASUU strike. As Claire indicated, this is now well past 6 months. Good morning, Nigeria is the program, and we thank you for tuning in. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Claire Adilabo Abdul-Razak. There's been going back and forth both on both sides. We don't even know what to believe at the moment. Federal government says they've met 80% of the demands. Also, it's saying on the other hand, government has shown no optimistic stance to their demands. Meanwhile, of course, some state universities are pulling out. Following what they say was the statement made by the ASUU president himself against the state universities.
That's right. The ASUU president was widely quoted as having said that state universities are irrelevant and that they are quacks. That's to use his words. And that, of course, has created quite some discomfort, if not displeasure, amongst state universities. Ekiti State has been one of the latest to pull out of the strike and continue with its academic activities. There are a number of issues still on the table that are unclear, even from the statement issued by ASUU at the end of its NEC meeting here at the University of Abuja. At the weekend, it was on Sunday, probably lasted up until Monday. The statement didn't quite disclose the details that remain unresolved, except to say that an agreement has not been reached. There are financial issues. Government on its own had previously said through the Minister of Labour that to implement some of the demands of ASUU would cost government 1.1 trillion naira. But ASUU says no. Yeah, ASUU says no, that's not correct. But ASUU doesn't tell us how much it would cost to implement that. ASUU also says that no progress has been made with respect to its demand for the utilization of UTAS and the abandonment of IPs for university lecturers. Now, the government itself, of course, had earlier indicated that there were issues identified by NITDA, that is the Technology Development Agency, that said there were issues with UTAS, and they needed to resolve all of that. Plus, if you know, the non-academic staff union have also brought their own salary wage, their own equivalent of Utah. So how will all of this be resolved? How long more can the students continue to stay at home?
Indeed, it's a conundrum. Yes, it was a shock to hear the indefinite extension. But that's why we are having this discussion today on Good Morning Nigeria. Once again, I am Claire Adilabo Abdul-Razak. It's always a pleasure to have you with us on the program. Hopefully today we will be able to have very constructive discussions and see if our guests can give us insight into what can be done or how a resolution can be brokered between the two parties involved. Good Morning Nigeria is live on the network service of the NTA, and in line with our tradition, we will bring you our complimentary segments. Coming up shortly will be highlights of the morning news. We'll also have our business segment much later, and much later we'll do a review of what the newspapers are saying. So for now, here is Frama Pai with the early morning news. Frama, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Claire. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Nigerians. And here is the morning news. The expansion of security cooperation between Africa and Japan within the framework of the new approach for peace and stability is expected to benefit Nigeria and other African countries with technology towards eliminating insurgency. Speaking in Tunis at the Tokyo International Conference on African Development Summit, Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyema, says various security mechanisms supported by the African unions, such as multinational joint task force, the G5 Sahel, and the African Standby Force, need to be recalibrated to meet the current challenges against terrorism and banditry. Onyema believes that the TCAD partnership is another platform for engagement in addressing global problems in health, climate change and economy, and gives assurance of Nigeria's full support for the objectives of the summit and other multilateral forums. The need for proper coordination among security agencies, building public confidence in the armed forces of Nigeria, and national reorientation for national security, as well as understanding of deliberate government's effort at providing security, have been identified as key to strengthening local governance in the country. These are contained in the lectures at the National Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies, Executive Course 44.
Periodically, we've had to conduct workshops and seminars to make everyone within the security governance structure, for them to know what must be done, what they have done, what they need to escalate, what may not be too good, and which they need to work on.
When you are trying to mobilize the entire nation, to have a buy-in, to show concern and contribute their quotas in the efforts the country is making to deal with the security challenges we are facing, the local government level is very crucial.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is asking for the end of testing of nuclear weapons, consigning them to history once and for all. This comes during the annual observance of the International Day Against Nuclear Tests, which also calls for global unity to end nuclear weapons, which should have no place in the world.
The significance of this day is to have a global voice calling on banning of nuclear tests in a way that the global community will have either total elimination or at least reduction in nuclear tests that give rise to nuclear weapons.
But the most important thing is that in the whole of African country, we came together as Africans to say that we want to have an Africa that is free of nuclear weapons. And therefore, we have the Plindaba Treaty, which Nigeria is a champion in ensuring that the Plindaba Treaty come into force.
Federal government is proposing a sum of 19.76 trillion naira expenditure for 2023. The Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, made this known during an engagement with the House of Representatives Committee on Finance for an overview of the medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper 2023 to 2025 submitted to the National Assembly for approval.
The average crude oil price, we all know, has been growing in the crude oil market. And this is supposed to have been an advantage to us, seeing as our budget was fixed at 73 and we have an average of 103. However, the higher oil price is offset by lower oil production output, which as at April stood at 1.32, and even up to July is still averaging the same. NNPC attributes this fall in production to the high incidence of crude oil theft and pipeline vandalization.
If we're able to get more revenue from the agencies, the deficit will reduce. The security of our oil equipment, nature of the terrain where our oil pipelines are, there is the need for them to deploy incentive mechanism. Most countries, they are looking for ways to stimulate their economy. What do we have in place for ordinary Nigerians.
And key players in the judicial sector across the country are in Abuja, brainstorming on ways of sustaining financial integrity in the sector. The National Workshop on Management of Judicial Financial Resources is at the instance of the National Judicial Institute and is aimed at making the judiciary more efficient in the performance of duties.
As resource managers in the judiciary, you must keep abreast of current trends in financial sector in an effort to curb corruption and waste. And in so doing, enhance transparency in your day-to-day activities in the judiciary. Consequently, you should avoid all appearances of miscreancy and live above board, doing otherwise will negatively affect the integrity of the judiciary.
United Nations independent expert on the enjoyment of all human rights by older persons, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva, Dr. Claudia Mala, is in Nigeria to assess the implementation of national, regional, and international standards relevant to the rights of older persons. A few months after defecting from the All Progressive Congress to the new Nigeria People's Party, the senator representing Kano Central District at the National Assembly, Malam Ibrahim Shekaro, has rejoined the People's Democratic Party. Until his defection, Senator Shekaro was the senatorial candidate of the NNPP in his constituency. And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Claire and Kingsley after this break.
So to the next level. Every morning is one day closer to your ambition. So, make every morning count. Cup after cup, morning after morning. Start strong, finish strong. Nescafe.
Introducing the new and tasty Peak Yogurt, the nourishment to be you, do you, and go for you. Peak Yogurt comes in orange, strawberry, and plain sweetened flavour. All available in nearby stores.
Join us to stop crude oil and product theft at production sites, on the pipeline, at terminals, at the depots, on vessels, at refineries. Help stop crude oil and product theft. Report infringement to www.stopcrudetheft.com. You can also validate genuine purchase at validate.stopcrudetheft.com. Please report and be rewarded. This message is from the Nigerian National Petroleum Company.
As the 2023 elections draw near, remember, evil prospers when good men and women only wish for peace, but never take a step to make peaceful elections happen. Are you a father? Are you a mother? What are you saying to your children as the elections approach? Have you warned them not to let themselves be used to cause violence? Have you explained to them what the consequences of electoral violence might be? Do your part to make peaceful elections happen. Talk to your children. Protect them from unscrupulous politicians who want to put them in harm's way, while their own children are comfortable at home, within, and outside the country. Let's join hands to make 2023 elections peaceful. This message is from the National Orientation Agency, NOAA.
Everywhere you go, from banks to hospitals to public offices, mass transit stations, airports, and even telecommunication centers, senior citizens are treated as nuisances. They are not. They are senior members of our society, and they deserve the utmost respect. We shouldn't be having our aged fathers and mothers standing in long queues to withdraw their monies at banks. Our retired senior citizens shouldn't be caught standing in buses for lack of seats or chasing after one just to get to their destination. Senior citizens shouldn't have to sit long hours in hospital corridors with no geriatric specialist to attend to them. Our senior citizens deserve better treatment from all of us. They deserve to be listened to. They are deserving of seat reservations on public buses and priority attendance in public spaces. As young people, we are quick to say, no one owes you. This is not true. We owe the elderly members of our society a helping hand, our services, and respect. Age-friendly societies have more senior citizens enjoying good health, living safely, and engaging in meaningful community work than those who do not. We define age-friendly services for senior citizens.
All right, welcome back. If you've just tuned in, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and it's happening live on the network service of the NTA. So let's give you some business tips now. And we hear that the growth recorded across the various e-payment platforms have remained strong in the past 7 months of 2022. And that data is coming from the Nigeria Interbank Settlement System. This is part of our business package as put together by our correspondent Alika Okpanachi Arwa.
Some of the expected benefits arising from the adoption of the e-Naira include deepening financial inclusion, improving the efficiency of payments, enhancing cross-border payments and remittances, improving trade integration, a viable option for the distribution of stimulus and government interventions, and improved transmission of monetary policy.
Let's take a look at Monday tradings on the floor of the exchange. With business news, Alika Okpanachi Arwa.
All right, that was business news as put together by Alika Okpanachi Arwa. So let's move on to newspaper review, and that's up next.
All right. Thank you, Claire. Well, of course, we're having the it's caught in the act, as the saying goes. We have at least 3 newspapers this morning, and Leadership, The Sun, and one other. Let's begin by taking a look at the window page of the Leadership newspaper. Above the nameplate, groom, 6 guests die, bride, and 8 others hospitalized. Groom, 6 wedding guests die, bride, and 8 others hospitalized in Enugu. That's a sad one there. Details on page 16. Court rejects federal government's request to extradite Kyari to the U.S. And below the nameplate, federal government piles more debts on next president with 11 trillion naira borrowing for 2023. And Shekarau hobnobs with APC, NP, NNPP, PDP in 3 months. Shekarau, that's in Kano, hobnobs with APC, NNPP, PDP in 3 months. Details of that you find on page 7. Now the lead story comes with a kicker after 199 days of industrial action. ASUU loses ground as more state varsities pull out of strike. You have the details on page 4, but the riders to that headline are as follows. Pro-chancellors want union democratized as lecturers extend strike indefinitely. Say unions' quest for funding varsities outdated. Slam Oshodeke for calling state varsities quacks. We have met over 80% of lecturers' demands. That's the federal government. they have lost Nigerians' sympathy. That's the last rider to that. And then on the first column, the left-hand side of the paper, court restrains President Muhammadu Buhari and NBC, that's the Broadcasting Commission, from shutting down 53 broadcast stations. Ohaneze to pick consensus presidential candidate from Southeast. Claire.
Kingsley, there are quite a lot of political news on the front pages, and I'm wondering, how do we draw the line between these stories and campaign news? Because, I mean, almost all the papers are carrying stories about
campaigns.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it's something that has to be examined going forward. The former flag of campaigns so sometime next month for the general elections beginning in February next year. But obviously some of the activities that we have seen would amount to invariably campaigns. But so you can also not stop the kind of activities that we are seeing at the moment. The fact that candidates have emerged from the primaries of the political parties doesn't mean that the candidates will be quiet before the former flag off. Perhaps they should then bring forward the flag off of campaigns that as soon as the primaries are over, then they might as well begin their campaigns.
Honestly, because
campaigns can't be too early.
I'm wondering how the regulating authorities can, control what is happening now. Anyhow, we have Daily Sun reporting on some of the political activities. I won't go into that, but let me take one of the stories trending on the front page. Court bars Buhari NBC from shutting down 53 broadcast stations. That story is on page 28. And Kingsley, I thought that NBC had a meeting with Bonn, and I think there was an agreement to suspend the shutting down of those stations, pending some form of resolution.
Well, that's true. And NBC, of course, has then proceeded with suspending the enforcement of its earlier directive to shut down those stations. That was on the basis of that. Yes. But this one is arising from an action in court by Serap and the Guild of Editors. And it's a much deeper thing in the sense that the action is even querying the basis of the renewal of license fees and why that should be so. But this is an interim order, so the matter is still sub judice, and then we'll see how it pans out.
Yes. Okay, thank you for that explanation. So, still with the Daily Sun, federal government unsure of capital projects vote in 2023, proposes 19.76 trillion naira budget. That's interesting. Other stories trending, if we just tilt down, heavy cash movements threatening Nigeria, EFCC. It's on page 27. Again, ASUU extends strike as Copson says state varsities can't be coerced to implementing agreement. Buhari seeks rejig of AU's security mechanisms to end terrorism and banditry. It's on page 28. Again, court rejects FJ's request to extradite Abba Kyari to US. And IGP condemns attacks on policemen, orders prosecution of offenders. Okay. That's the front page of the Daily Sun. So let me move on to the National Star. Again, it's all on political story, and I will have to skip it. But there is a story there. Hush Puppy, court rejects FG's request for Abba Kyari's extradition to US. It's a story that is trending. Just a little below the nameplate, ASUU again extends strike. And mummified corpses, Edo police gives details of investigation. Now, court stops Buhari again. We read out that story earlier on. I think these are all that I have, Kingsley, for now.
Well, yeah, interesting stories there. In the case of the federal government's request to extradite Abba Kyari, that's the suspended Deputy Commissioner of Police to the U.S. In the matter involving the Nigerian known otherwise as Hush Puppy, who is in the U.S. The court ruled and said that the request was incompetent in the sense that Abba Kyari, according to the depositions in court, Abba Kyari had the confidence of his bosses while undertaking the activities he was alleged to have undertaken with Hush Puppy, and that they were all intended to entrap Hush Puppy, bring him to Nigeria, and then, of course, pick him up with the intelligence response team of the Inspector General of Police. That's one leg of the story. Second leg is that the rules governing extradition are pretty clear. Abba Kyari, it's also undergoing trial for another matter, and the person who's already undergoing trial cannot simultaneously be extradited to another jurisdiction for trial. So that's the ground. We'll see. Perhaps this probably is not the end of the story. It depends on how the trial pans out otherwise, or whether, for instance, the Attorney General of the Federation seek to go on appeal, because this is a decision by the court of first instance. That's one.
Story.
Yeah.
Okay, this story on the front page on the issue of capital projects. The Daily Sun says that FG unsure of capital projects votes in 2023. Apparently, this is a story that is emanating from the Minister of Finance's appearance, yesterday to the National Assembly, where she has been reported to have said that there will be no treasury-funded capital projects for the MDAs. Now, I'm wondering what implication this will have, because it will mean some of the capital projects that are meant to drive attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals will not be pursued.
That's a very important observation that you have made. But I thought that again, depending on the approach of the editors and what stories they consider significant, I thought that the finance minister's warning yesterday, or statement, if you may, was one that ordinarily should trigger some concern, and then ways, of course, getting around it. Because the fundamental basis of what you said was that the country continues to experience revenue shortages. But in the meantime, the country also has to service its debts, local and foreign. And you cannot therefore begin to get into more debt when you know you have a revenue challenge, even though the numbers in terms of the relativity of your debt as a ratio to your GDP would appear to be suitable or comfortable in the meantime. So there is a revenue challenge. And why is there a persisting revenue challenge? Because we've heard that over the years. And we have also seen what the revenue authorities, more particularly FRS, has tried to do in casting the net much wider and bringing in more persons into the net. In other words, greater efficiency in tax administration. But the revenue shortfalls continue. Again, some persons would argue that you're not having a boom in the economy. So if you were having a boom, the latest reports say that we have had a growth of around 3.something%, but you're not having a boom in the economy. If you're having a boom, then more taxes will accrue. But the issue of then saying that, look, there will be no treasury-funded capital projects means that
there's so many implications.
Many implications.
But easily,
yes,
some of these ministries are not revenue generating. We could say, okay, those agencies that are revenue generating, can do well to, look for other areas of creating income. But what about the ministries that are not revenue generating, that depend on allocations from the Treasury to fund projects? And there are quite a number of government projects and programs that are multi-sectorally implemented. There are so many SDG goals, and in particular because most of the priority areas deal with human health. It deals with education of children, it deals with women, it deals with the vulnerable groups and issues of poverty. You need a lot of, you need money to drive, projects.
Those projects, no question about that, but I want to also assume that if the numbers begin to look up, there can always be a realignment in terms of, for instance, a supplementary budget going forward once the economy gets into 2023. So if there are revenue shortfalls that did not enable the federal government to have treasury-funded capital projects, then, of course, you can always, as I said, have a supplementary allocation going forward. But which is not to say that all MDAs will have virtually nothing to do. Yes, I believe so. But these are issues that I think that Treasury experts and other economic analysts will focus on. I want to raise two issues. They are not on the front pages of the papers that we read this morning. I read one of the stories online, and I've not read a rebuttal of the story, and it is coming from Ondo State. The governor of Ondo State, Akeredolu, Leonard Senior Advocate of Nigeria, is said to have issued a directive that all school teachers in Ondo State should have their children enrolled in public schools.
Yes.
And
yes, I read it as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes,
so that all school teachers in Ondo State should have their children enrolled in public schools. In other words, you cannot have your children in private schools while you are a teacher with the state. Part of the reason, as was reported, is that school enrollment had dropped because teachers were not having their own children get onto the public school system. It's a good idea on the face of it, but it is not comprehensive enough. Why single out school teachers in Ondo State? School teachers in Ondo State are not responsible for budgeting, neither are they responsible for the implementation of budget allocations. We're just discussing federal government allocations now. So if there isn't sufficient funding for public schools to bring them to the standard of private schools, why now do you want the school teachers alone to bear the burden? If you had said all government employees in Ondo State have your children enrolled in public schools, then that would be ideal. But in the meantime, I think it is discriminatory, and the governor, meaning well, may have to review this altogether.
And I think
withdraw it.
What can be done, again, Kingsley, just before we round off this segment, is, and I want to recall, in River State, I think it was during the tenure of the former Minister of Transportation, Rotimi Chibuike-Amaechi, the schools, the model schools he built, public schools, you find that the parents were withdrawing their, students from private schools.
That's right.
From private schools. It got to a stage where even the schools where I had my children, parents were withdrawing their, people's sending them to the public model schools. Yes. So all we need to do, we don't have to make laws. We need to, upgrade our infrastructure.
But that's not the business of the school teachers to
exactly.
do. Yes. It's the business of the government. In this case, it will be through SUBEB. That is the State Universal Basic Education Board.
That's why they got funds.
Absolutely.
And most states have not been accessing their own.
Well, you bet. Yes. One other last story. Very quickly, I know that we're out of time, Claire. One other last story. 2 airline pilots who fly Air France have been suspended for fighting in the cockpit.
Is that true? Is that true story?
Absolutely true. The first time I saw the headline and I read the story, I said to myself, could it be another boo-boo? But on various platforms, reputable international media outlets, the story has been confirmed that 2 airline pilots of Air France have been suspended for fighting in the cockpit. The incident happened mid-air. This was in June this year, and the flight was from Geneva to Paris. My question is, why did it take at least 2 months for the 2 pilots to be suspended?
That was
scary. Absolutely scary. Absolutely scary. So they've been suspended, and we do hope that they learn their lessons. They fought in the cockpit. One of them then left because the other cabin crew intervened, and one of the pilots then took the aircraft to safe landing. The flight from Geneva to Paris ran about 45 minutes. I believe I'm not quite sure what about 45 minutes. Yeah, Geneva. I used to take that. I used to enjoy that flight on Swiss Air when Swiss Air was in operation. So, Claire, in the absence of anything else, we call it time on our newspaper review segment. It's Good Morning Nigeria live on NTA's network service. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with what ASUU has now described as comprehensive, total, and indefinite extension of the ongoing strike.
For a great start to your day, breakfast time is time.
We start our day with a nourishing Kellogg's breakfast, powered with the goodness of grains and 11 essential vitamins and minerals. Kellogg's makes a great tasting breakfast for all of us.
Breakfast time is Kellogg's time.
Bye, Mom.
He's going to play in this weather. Why did you let him go? He might fall ill.
And if he doesn't go out for practice, how will he win more trophies? To protect our family from illness-causing germs during the rainy season, we use Dettol soap every day.
Dettol with germ defense gives you protection. Rainy season brings a lot of germs, and Dettol soap's germ defense protects you from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Dettol soap is endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association. Be Dettol Soap.
Get into this beautiful pasta. Chicken soup, juicy licking prawns. Thank you. Icy Fish is here. If you're in Lagos, you need to check out this place. It's beautiful. Oh. I don't want to be an amebo, but you guys have to see this.
You?
Girl, I'm just trying to give you good content.
Get 2 GB data plus 1 hour YouTube free on Airtel Super Binge Plan. Dial *141 *514# now. Airtel, the smartphone network.
Every morning is an opportunity to take your hustle to the next level. Every morning is one day closer to your ambition. So, make every morning count. Cup after cup, morning after morning. Start strong, finish strong. Nescafe.
Join us to stop crude oil and product theft at production sites, on the pipeline, at terminals, at the depots, on vessels, at refineries. Help stop crude oil and product theft. Report infringement to www.stopcrudetheft.com. You can also validate genuine purchase at validate.stopcrudetheft.com. Please report and be rewarded. This message is from the Nigerian National Petroleum Company.
To every politician, as the campaigns gain momentum and passions begin to rise, remember, the errors of your opponents do not make you a success. Do not run down your opponent and inflame passions to violence between and among your supporters. What counts is what you plan to do for the electorate and how you intend to relieve the sufferings and bring succor. Nigeria is in dire need of patriotic leaders at all levels, leaders who will make national development their priority. Concentrate on telling the electorate what you intend to do when you get into office. Focus on making your vision clear to the electorate. Don't engage in verbal abuses, fake news, or speeches. Keep dealing with issues that will bring progress. You win the hearts and minds of the people by being above board, by being civil, patriotic, and showing empathy. Let's join hands to make the 2023 elections peaceful. A message from the National Orientation Agency.
That is it. Yeah.
All right. Of course, the studio is live, and our guests are just making, of course, themselves comfortable. But just before we bring them into our conversation, to remind you again that Nigerian students in public universities have been at home for the past 6 months. Of course, following the strike called by the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU. But just yesterday, the strike took a new dimension as ASUU says it has, I want to use the adjectives Kingsley used earlier on, extended a comprehensive, or it has embarked on a comprehensive, total and indefinite strike this time around. And that declaration was against the expectations of many Nigerians, including students, parents, and every concerned citizen. So our background report is compiled by Joseph Oteng. Let's listen to him, and it will chronicle some of the issues and efforts made to end the strike.
The lecturers have refused to bow down and persisted with the strike. While government says it has implemented much of the demands of ASUU, the union insists it needs more to reposition the nation's highest academic institutions for development of the nation's education sector. Not long ago, ASUU rejected the recommended Consolidated University Academic Salary Structure prepared by the National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission. In early August, ASUU went on to roll over the strike for another 4 weeks, claiming it's giving government additional time to implement the pending demands. And just yesterday at a meeting in Abuja, the union overwhelmingly voted against resumption, venting his anger on a national television as to why some state universities have refused to toe the path of ASUU. The president of the union, Emmanuel Osudike, described them as irrelevant and quacks. The statement has evoked criticism from the public and the academia, with a committee of pro-chancellors of state-owned universities saying ASUU's approach to the issue of funding of tertiary education in a modern global world is archaic and impracticable anywhere in the world. Adding membership of ASUU is voluntary, therefore state universities cannot be forced or coerced to implement agreements. The questions on the lips of many include: how beneficiary is the prolonged ASUU industrial action to the development of the Nigerian university and their students? How realistic are ASUU requests? And is there a way out that will interest both parties? And what is the fate of the affected students? Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will try to provide some insights.
All right, thank you very much for that background report. We have guests with us here in the studios as well as guests joining us via Zoom. Yeah, let's welcome Comrade Issa Aremu. Comrade Issa Aremu, a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, and Director General and CEO, Michael Imodu National Institute for Labor Studies. That's at Ilorin in Kwara State. Comrade Issa Aremu, glad to have you this morning.
Good morning, Nigerians. True Sadalo and
all right.
Yeah.
And also here with us in the studios, it's Professor Abdullahi Sule Kano. He's a former president of ASUU. Professor Sule Kano, we're glad to have you.
Good morning, everybody.
Glad?
Okay, you have one more guest to introduce.
I wanted to ask you to introduce so that you'll be two apiece. You know, you always like gender balance in this thing, so it will be two apiece. But let's also, at this time, welcome a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, very passionate about issues surrounding education, Chief Sylvester Onoja, former Commissioner for Education in Kogi State, and also where he was former chairman of the Teaching Service Commission in that state. But people know him very well, his pupils, whenever they see him, and his students, former principal of King's College in Lagos. Chief Sylvester Onoja, considering the circumstances under which you had to make it to the studios this morning, we really appreciate your presence today.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Kingsley, talking about gender, yes, indeed. That's we're all pursuing an inclusive, system. So any program you don't have gender balance, that calls for concern. Even in the makeup of our guests here, there's no balance.
Well, you're here.
Well, no, I'm the presenter.
Yeah, but the segment, clear. I mean, but our viewers do know that this segment permits the injection of presenter opinion, even as leading questions.
Well, let me just, Alita continue. So let me also introduce our guest who's joining us via Zoom from Ile-Ife. And if we can have him, Dr. Niyi Simono is the National Coordinator, Congress of University Academics. That's him. Thank you very much for joining us, Doctor.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much for having me this morning.
Okay, Kingsley.
All right, gentlemen, once again, we're glad to have you. Dr. Simono, we hope that your Zoom connection will be stable and sharp throughout this conversation. But let's begin with the former president of ASUU, Professor Abdullahi Sulekano. We've had you on Good Morning Nigeria in the past discussing the same issues. It's 6 months and 2 weeks into the latest industrial action by ASUU, and the issues surrounding the extension, which ASUU has now described as comprehensive, total, and indefinite. Those issues are probably fairly well known. But perhaps one should ask a bit provocatively, as some persons have suggested in some quarters, is there some competition amongst the various leadership of ASUU on different occasions to see who organizes the longest strike action in the history of ASUU?
Nothing like that, actually. It's the history and the dynamics in the way the university in Nigeria has been handled that generates all these things that you are seeing. And that historical facts, which you can scientifically analyze, takes almost every leader in the academic cycle who takes that position, that he has to act that way. So it's not about competition at all. If there is anybody who thinks about that, it's a myth. The reality is that every ASUU president had to be confronted with the very challenging conditions in which his wish and aspiration that makes him think that Nigerian university should be like any other university in the world in the context of standard and operations and traditions of scholarship. And even if you can't get the international standard, at least have the first generation standard, for those who are in the universities up to late 70s, even early 80s, they know that there is a fundamental difference between what they were at that time and today. And that's the concern. And when the leadership of the union raises that concern, it's hardly been appreciated by government. And in fact, this is what led to the setting up of a team, by government that subsequently we call the program as need assessment. After the 2009 agreement, the union made an estimate of what it think will, salvage the university from the terrible condition that they are in. In that assessment, it was a scientific study. And we estimated at least about almost 4 trillion can put Nigerian universities at par with any international university in the world. But at a point in time, that figure would seem to have been exaggerated. Studies reviewed and reviewed, then we established that at least what we need, the minimum we need, is just about 1.4 trillion to put them at least to the minimum conditions that we can attract scholars from other parts of the world, and we can attract students, and we can make them also play a relevant role in the economy of the country, which we know we can within a short time. But unfortunately, the government did not agree with us, but we were able to convince them, okay, send an independent committee to go and do that. They set up the need assessment committee. Professor Mahmoud, the now INEC chairman, chaired that committee. They went around the universities and assessed the actual conditions of the decay. And they came out with virtually the same estimate that we did, 1.3 trillion. We are scholars, we cannot be that stupid and unreasonable, We didn't say that the government should cough out 1.3 billion in one fell swoop. In one fell swoop. It was planned that this can be handled in 6 years. 6 years from 2013. Okay. Since when the first tranche was released, no tranche was ever released again. That's the cause of the crisis.
We've been reading all the back and forth stories. It's out there in the domain. But I'd like to start my question. Kingsley permits me. From the immediate, and we know that since the strike started on the 14th of February,
yes,
the battleground has not remained the same. It's been shifted. We're told that on the part of the federal government, some overtures have been made, some concessions have been made, some actions have been taken. Of course, ASUU leadership, has come to say, that had not happened. We don't know what the true picture is as we speak. But against this background, that discussions have been going on, what do you think of this comprehensive, indefinite, and total extension of the strike?
You see, the fundamental basis of that is that all that we went through for almost 5 years now, the process of negotiation, which violates the international labor law, both our domestic labor law and international labor convention, you negotiate with labor within a short time. That negotiation is supposed to take only 6 weeks. It lasted over 3 years. And yet, even at a point at which it was clear to almost every Nigerian that we are reaching to a point of, resolving the matter, then it was cancelled. The principle of collective bargaining was virtually being, in a way, being cancelled or abolished, I would say, by government. They push aside what was negotiated on the table and now hand over an award, take it or leave it. That's the language. Take it or leave it. That's the crux of the matter. And if you do that to any category of worker, who is not a slave, he has a right, he's a citizen. He will protest. That's what actually caused the complications.
Okay, well, Professor Sulekano, thank you very much. We'll have the benefit of your participation in this conversation throughout. We hope we'll be able to drill into the specifics of the demands of ASUU, because most of what is reported now is, he said, he added, he didn't say, the other one said, government said this, no, ASUU said this. So we need some clarification. We know that you don't belong to the current executive committee or council of ASUU, but of course you are an insider and you remain an academic. So thank you very much, Professor Sulekano. We will, as I said, return to you in the course of the conversation. Very quickly, I want to bring in Comrade Isaremo. Comrade Isaremo, some weeks ago, we had a conversation on this same subject matter. And I recalled part of what you were saying with respect to the tactics, if you may, of labor agitation, labor demand, and basically to reduce it to a layman's language is that, look, pick your fights, win some, lose some, move on, and return when the atmosphere or the climate is favorable. Well, here we are since our last conversation on the ASUU strike. Now it looks like it's bleak. What are your thoughts?
Well, thank you, Tadela. Once again, let me say good morning to everybody, and in particular my co-discussants. Well, I think Professor Sulekano, my very good friend, comrade too, I think he has tried to put the issues from ASUU point of view in perspective. And I don't think there's nobody who's eminently qualified to say so, because he was the former president of ASUU. I don't know whether I get it right, between 2004 and 2008. And also currently is part of the negotiating team with the government. My takeaway from his submission is that it is clear that we have a legacy problem in our hand, because he went on historic excursions, or I will have come a long way. So I think we should get it clear that there's a legacy crisis here. So it's not just starting now. It's been on almost from 1981, when we had the decline in the funding for public universities. Interestingly, some of us also went to these universities, including my dear comrade. Things were far from being perfect when we were in the universities. I know very well. I mean, I've been to ABU back now, and I know we have more modern structures than we used to have them when I was there. And I know the conditions of our lecturers that time. Some were riding bicycles, but they were really committed to the academic scholarship, start of the challenges. But I know from 80s, we had decline in the funding of public education, which has now made the Association of Academic Staff to, engage in struggles for improvement in reviving the public university. And that's why it's done very well in terms of advocacy to raise the issues about the plight of the universities. So, quick takeaway there is that it's been on, so it's not just now. And I think all of us, all the parties involved in this crisis, must recognize that improvement in any sector is a work in progress. It cannot be once and for all. But my quick submission here, which I want to make, don't forget, once a comrade, always a comrade. But for now, I'm also the Director General of Michael Imodi Labour Institute in Ilorin. Our job is to promote knowledge, education about labor market issues. One quick thing I would like to raise is that what we have is also crisis of collective bargaining. And in the world of work, Nigeria has very robust labor laws. We are a member of ILO, we have labor laws, which all these laws emphasize that there will always be conflict in the world of work. They are inevitable, including the one we're having in the education sector. But the way to resolve this crisis is through dialogue, collective bargaining. And the process of collective bargaining means be serious. The parties have to be serious, but don't be too serious so that you can be serious again. Now, what does that one mean? That we must have sense of compromises. You make your demand, which is known as proposals, and of course there will be discussions. You work out an agreement, the other parties will bring counter proposals, then you negotiate, you find a way to have a compromise. That's the way it should be. I mean, she's also affiliate member of Nigerian Labour Congress, and don't forget, now we have signed 5 national agreement dealing with minimum wage, new minimum wages. The latest one is the current one of 30,000. Now, if you check right from the beginning, including the first one, in fact, that was the first one, 1981, led by Alhaji Hassan Sumanu, a pioneer president of NSC, who's also trustee of ASUU. The strike lasted just for 2 days. Once they called for discussion, we went for negotiation. The last demand for new minimum wage, we actually demanded for 96,000. Don't forget that time per month. But what we could get at the end of the day was 30,000 after you do all the tradings and co. So what I'm saying is that negotiation is about compromises. And I think the principles should apply to the education sector. We should find a way. Then, of course, in this process, there could be breakdown. There will be breakdown, strike, and I know I listened to Professor Sule very well. In fact, they had to threaten strike before they resumed negotiation last time, for 2 weeks, and they came back. Now, but the question I want to raise is that, and I listened to Sule very well, because he said, according to the principles of negotiation, of discussion worldwide, that negotiation shouldn't last more than certain minimum. It shouldn't be too long, and I agree with you.
6 weeks.
6 weeks, fine. We can debate that, but I take his point that because it's meant to resolve problem, because the world of work is world of productivity. So quickly you discuss, you return back. But so also our reaction should be time bound. So if for whatever reason there's a breakdown, you go on strike 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, now 200 days. what will be the limit to it? And that's my own worry. When I listen to the last communicator of ASUU, comprehensive, total, indefinite. I was saying, are we having a warfare or an industrial conflict? Okay, I'm just posting this. Not that I have an answer.
Yes,
but let me, the lack report I want to raise on this, let me give you a practical example. Recently, the National Union of Electricity Workers had cause to go on strike. I don't know, maybe you have generator in your house, but even with the comrades,
I better pass my load.
But even with the comrades, we also that from National Grid. But one thing you must grant Adero and his team is that NUC quickly they call up the strike. It wasn't prolonged. Now they are back to negotiation. And they are almost commit to. They also gave notice to say no more than 2 weeks. And my finding shows that they're almost concluding their negotiation because they also knew that we can strike, but make it brief. Because the whole strike is to make the other parties to return to the table for discussions, so that we have an eye on the ball. And in the case of education sector, my concern is the plight of those poor students. Okay, how long can the strike last? Well, we have total indefinite strike. I would say total non-teaching. We are not going to graduate straight in this way. I think those are the issues. Okay. I thought we should open the door for discussion.
Okay, let me put you a little bit on the spot.
Okay.
Now you are the Director General of the National Institute for Labor Studies. So you have a better insight of the workings and thinkings and of government. I'm sure that if you were on the other side now, you will also be amplifying the stance of comprehensive, total and indefinite strike. If you were if you were still on the other side. But can you, from your experience on both sides, what can you tell us about government's posture towards ASUU demands? Because we've heard several times ASUU says government is deceitful, government is not is not straightforward with them, government does not want to parley. What do you think is government? How can you describe government's posture towards these whole demands?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing I've said. But by the way, don't forget, I've seen it on all sides. Don't forget, when I was in labor, I've led a union from a very turbulent sector. Textile and garment workers. We've signed. As I returned, I left, and I'm very sure my successors continue the struggle. We've signed close to 45 national agreements. When textile was textile, and none we did by shutting down the industry. None. Through process of collective bargaining, compromises. We also put a framework in which we negotiate almost every 2 years. And all the parties obey they abide by the collective agreement. So what I'm saying is that even when I was the other side, as you put it, although I'm on the side, as you put it that, I want to put it that way. I think the principle remains the same, that government or any party should learn to respect collective agreement as enter into. Now, if for whatever reason the agreement is no more sustainable, you must reopen the need for discussions. With the current struggle going on, I don't know, unfortunately government officials are not here. When I mean government officials, it would be nice to have the sector ministers, because Ministry of Education, because Ministry of Labor only arbitrates when, they couldn't reach an agreement, but it would have been nice to listen to. But what I've also have gathered is that there have been series of discussions going on. And of course, you've seen them. We've seen it also on TV. And the rest of them. Now, the bottom line is what will be the level of compromise that should be reached. And ASUU talk of 1.2 trillion. If you ask me, the way to revive public education, you even need more than that. No. So I'm for it. I know President Buhari, when he came to office, tried to raise the budget allocation to education up to about 8%. at a point about 3-4 years ago, although it has come down now, given the collapse of semi-collapse of the oil revenue and co. So everybody's committed to more funding, as the case may be. But whether you need 1 trillion, 2 trillion, it comes from the same national revenue. How do you get it done? Again, this way, government also make its own case to say, wait, this is what we have on offer. And if you cannot give, because I know this 1 trillion, even during Jonathan, I think it was agreed upon, but unfortunately, he couldn't fund it either. So you now agree to pay in tranches. Maybe that's what I'm looking for. But you need to educate us further on that. But I also know that the government have put some fund, they put something on offer, but it's not enough. Whatever it is, what I'm saying is that we must negotiate in an atmosphere in which all the parties are free to do so. You don't negotiate under pressure. Government has no right to lock out academic staff. I'm not communicating very well. I mean, because they lock them out, So also, once negotiation begins, ASUU must learn to bend down, suspend to allow for negotiation in a good atmosphere. Because let me round up on this note. The beauty of collective bargaining is that no power, no partner or no stakeholder should be too strong, because absolute power corrupts absolutely. Whether it is government that is too absolute, it leads to distortion. Whether it is union that has declared union power that is so absolute, it leads to distortion. You can get some results, sweetheart agreement under pressure. They will say inside, but it's not sustainable. That's the point I'm raising. But if you do something freely, in which everybody says this is what we have, you have a template to drive it there, because of 2009. You are still pursuing the same spirit of that agreement, because you could get it through pressure. I mean, whatever it is, but whatever the situation, the point I want to raise here is that everybody is committed to reviving the education sector. ASUU has raised the next level of the need for more funding. We've come a long way. I think it's important to now reach a compromise. And you can't do so, it has to be done through bargaining. And we can't do so if you do total indefinite.
Comprehensive.
Oh, well, you know better than me. It sounds like a warfare. And I think government should now have a way to look at, the way to address some of those concerns. Because I also know they talk of, up to now, they've not been paid for 6-7 months. That's also a legitimate claim.
Yeah.
You can't do so outside. It has to be on the negotiating table.
We are going to pause you. I know that.
Yes,
I know you can continue for the next hour. So you've raised a number of very important issues, as just the same way as Professor Sulekano raised very important issues. I want to crave the indulgence of Chief Sylvester Onoja. This is not to say, again, I know that one issue that you always canvass relates to the priority not given to secondary education. But we have a Zoom connection to Dr. Niyi Sumono. We earlier introduced him, and I hope the Zoom is still, all right, so the Zoom is still there. So I'm going to take advantage of it and then get him to weigh in on this issue. He's the National Coordinator of Congress of University Academics. The Congress of University Academics came up a couple of years ago, but what is the perspective on this whole issue on the extension of the strike, indefinite, total, and comprehensive? Well, are you on the same page with ASUU?
Is he on strike?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians, and thank you for having me this morning. I greet the guests in the house, whom I have profound respect for. From our perspective, or for our perspective, we think strongly and we believe strongly that this current impasse needs to be nipped in the bud, needs to be brought to a close in the shortest possible time. And that cannot be achieved with indefinite, with comprehensive, with total industry action. And we have the strong opinion that discussion, negotiation, engagement must continue. And as rightly opined by Senior Comrade Isarem, that kind of engagement, that kind of discussion should be done with an open mind. Should be done with intention. If you are going to that kind of engagement, that I'm not going to meet my adversary in that kind of engagement. Should be done in such a way that we have a mind that we can, a mind of give and take, concessions. And that has to continue, even in situations of war. Discussions, wars can be resolved eventually by discussions. And history has told us that. That's the immediate minimum that we request for to end this impasse immediately. Again, we're of the opinion strongly also that that kind of discussion should be expanded to include more stakeholders. We have eminent Nigerians like those in that studio, like those people that have unblemished record in their track record in the service of this country. The alumni of different universities, of different institutions, who have done well, who are still doing well in different walks of life. Because why we're advocating for that is simply because if you follow the trend, there's a breakdown of trust on the two parties involved. They are negotiating. We also advocate the expansion to include the parents and the students on the side of funding of university, because that thing, the issues can be broadly broken down into two. Funding of university under which you can get autonomy, under which you can get improvement in the structures, in the teaching materials, and in the research facilities, and so on and so forth. On the other side is the issue of remunerations, which is, I must say, is very poor. When it comes to that, with respect to negotiation, all of that stakeholders need to actually excuse. It has to do with the employee and the government to negotiate that. But issues that have to do with improvement of the standard of the universities, all these other stakeholders, we need to be brought in to expand the discussion. And before I stop here with this intervention, I need to also say that the feedback mechanism of the government needs to be improved upon strongly. In a situation where you reach out to the government, it takes about 1 month, 2 months before you get feedback. It's not encouraging at all. This is our common patrimony, education, and no nation can develop beyond the level of its education. So we want an immediate solution to this, and that immediate solution is with regards to continuous engagement with an open mind that has to be done, and done as good as now. Lastly, I want to say that going forward, we don't have to be reactionary in our situation, in our response to education, university education in this particular case. The media needs to also play its role of digging deep into who needs to do what needs to be done rather first, and who needs to do what. Timeline set, and Nigerians need to be brought into constant update of information on who is failing in his or her duties to do what, and when they need to do those things. So we don't have to wait until industry actions are called before we all become interested in what is going on in our universities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Simone, for your perspective. Let's bring in Chief Service Onoja, who is a former Commissioner for Education and former Chairman, Teaching Service Commission. In all of this drama going on, students are bearing the brunt. ASUU is saying government is insensitive and indifferent to the plight of children, students and their parents. And government is saying vice versa. Who exactly is hurting Nigerian students?
Thank you very much. I decided to stay for this discussion because I am passionate about the younger ones and those coming. The real enemies of the Nigerian student, ASUU, and the federal government. You see, I have always said, and I have said here several, that there is no legitimacy in education in Nigeria. In politics, legitimacy means that the right people are ruling, and they are ruling rightly. In education, legitimacy means that the right people are administering education, the right people are teaching, and the right people are learning. In this circumstance, the right people are not administering education, the right people are not teaching, and the right people are not learning. If the right people are administering education, this problem probably would have been resolved from the beginning. And if the right people are teaching, you know, I started teaching in the university. Then I taught in the primary school, taught in the secondary school, and then university, then secondary school. There is this saying in this country that the teacher's reward is in heaven. And all I have agitated for is that at least government should pay teachers the traveling allowances to go to heaven. Even that allowance is not being paid. It's unfortunate. There's the decay in education. It has always been there from primary school. Previous governments tried to raise standards of primary education. The UBEC is there. I'm familiar with that story. We always have free education in this country at the basic education level. But the only thing we have in this country going for us is that our schools are free of education. That is the only aspect of free education that we have. Those students are taught in the middle now, those who have left secondary school and all that, and the universities. Yes,